I want you to picture a drive. And, it's probably a drive you've done 100 times without even really thinking about what you were seeing.
Mm.
You start right in the city center. It's tight. It's loud. You're in those canyons of steel and glass.
Right, the urban core.
Exactly. Then you drive out. You pass that inner ring, the older houses, the really dense neighborhoods. Then you hit the highway.
The main artery out.
Yeah, the arterial bleed. And for, I don't know, the next 20, 30 minutes, it's the classic American suburb. It's almost comforting in its familiarity.
Totally. You know exactly what to expect. The strip malls, the big box stores, the car dealerships with those wacky inflatable tube men.
Those 9 gorillas, yeah.
Yeah.
You know exactly where you are. But then you keep driving, and the landscape, it starts to glitch.
Glitch is the perfect word for it. It stops making linear sense.
It really does. You pass the last big shopping complex, and then boom, there's a cornfield. But right in the middle of that cornfield is a brand new subdivision. And I don't mean like one farmhouse. I'm talking 50 enormous 4,000 square foot houses on these huge lots.
Right. And then what's next to that? A patch of forest?
A forest, then maybe a solitary glass office building sitting alone in a meadow.
Like it was dropped there by a spaceship.
Totally. Then a goat farm, then another subdivision. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, wait a minute. Am I in the country?
But you can't be, because there's a Starbucks 5 minutes down the road.
Right. So you think, am I in the city? Well, definitely not. Am I in the suburbs?
Well, I can't see my neighbor's house through the trees, so probably not the suburbs as we know them.
This is that uncanny valley of human settlement. We are entering the Exurb.
That's it.
And that, right there, is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to decode this very specific slice of geography that sits right at the bleeding edge of the metropolitan area.
It's the in-between.
It is. It's not city, it's not suburb, and it's not quite rural.
Yeah.
It's something else.
And I think interface is maybe the most important word we can use today. It's the analytical layer. We're not just looking at a place on a map.
Yeah.
We are analyzing the friction point. This is where the tectonic plates of the urban economy and the rural landscape just grind against each other.
That's a great way to put it.
We're looking at economic tethers, huge population shifts, and the weird sociological experiments that happen when you start mixing commuters with bears.
Oh, we're definitely getting to the bears. We have a massive stack of sources to work through. We're going to hit the sociological definitions, of course.
Yeah.
We've got the landmark Brookings Institution report, Find 'em Exurbia.
Which is basically the Bible for this topic.
It really is. But we're also going global with this. We have ecological studies from Xiamen, China that are just fascinating. We've got reports on these posh but kind of emptying neighborhoods outside Moscow.
Dogs.
And we're absolutely going to talk about how this specific type of zoning led to a literal battle between dogs and bears in New Jersey.
Which is a real thing, by the way. It sounds made up, but it's not.
I know. It's amazing and, frankly, a little terrifying. But, okay, before we get to the animal combat, let's try to pin this thing down. What actually is an exurb? Because, it feels like one of those buzzwords.
It does. It sounds like something a real estate agent invented to sell a house that's an hour away from everything.
Right. It's not in the middle of nowhere. It's an exclusive exurban retreat.
Exactly. But it's a real sociologically distinct concept.
Yeah.
And, to get a handle on it, we can start with the word itself. It's a portmanteau.
Okay.
It combines extra meaning outside and urban.
Outside the city. Simple enough.
Simple enough.
But who came up with it? It feels so modern, like something that would have popped up during the dot-com boom or something.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But it actually goes all the way back to 1955.
Wow, really?
Yeah. A writer named Auguste Comte Spectorsky wrote a book called The Exurbanites.
1955. That's like peak Mad Men era. That's the gray flannel suit era.
It absolutely is. And Spectorsky was describing something very, very specific to that time. He wasn't talking about the kind of middle-class sprawl we see today. Not at all.
So what was he looking at?
He was looking at what he called a ring of prosperous communities that were way out beyond the suburbs. Think about the top-tier New York executives who didn't want to live in one of those cookie-cutter levee towns.
They wanted something more.
They wanted the estate. They wanted the gentleman's farm out in Connecticut, or maybe a converted barn in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It was about creating a buffer.
So originally the exurb was a status symbol. It was the VIP section of living.
Precisely. It was for the urban elite who had the time and, more importantly, the money to handle that long commute from the country. It was all about exclusion.
So you moved there to get away from the masses in the city.
And the new masses in the suburbs. It was a double retreat.
But looking at the sources we have now, that definition just feels incomplete. I mean, sure, you still have wealthy people living in the woods, but the exurbs we're talking about in the 21st century seem like a totally different phenomenon.
They've absolutely evolved. The term has expanded so much. Today, exurbs are not just for the wealthy. In fact, many of them include what our sources call extra-urban districts that might actually be economically underdeveloped.
Underdeveloped in what way? Like no jobs?
It's more about infrastructure.
Yeah.
Public transit, for example. If you live in a classic 1950s suburb, you probably have a train station, maybe a bus line that can get you into the city.
Right. There's a connection.
There's a connection. In the modern exurb, you are often in a total transit desert. You might have found more affordable housing, which is a huge driver for why people move there. But you are paying for that affordability with your time. You are driving everywhere.
The sources also keep using this phrase, bedroom town, and I have to say, that phrase always depresses me a little.
It is a bit bleak, isn't it?
It really is. It implies you're just, storing your body there at night.
Well, that's the economic reality for a lot of these places. They're defined as agglomerations of housing and jobs outside the municipal boundaries. But for a very long time, that jobs part was basically missing.
It was just the housing part.
It was just housing. You sleep there, you wake up, you get in your car, and you leave. The community itself is basically empty from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
So let's try to visualize the density, because I think that's the hardest part for people to really grasp if they haven't seen it up close. The sources bring up Loudoun County in Virginia as, the poster child for this.
Loudoun is the perfect example because you can literally watch the timeline of American development by just driving west from Washington, D.C.
How so?
You start in Arlington, which is dense, it's urban. Then you drive through Fairfax County, which is the quintessential sprawling suburb. And then you cross the county line into Loudoun. And everything changes.
And what does that look like on the ground? Is it like hitting a wall?
It's not a wall, it's a gradient. It's a slow fade. You just start to notice the subdivisions are getting further apart. The roads might go from 4 lanes down to 2, but they're still jammed with rush hour traffic.
Oh, okay.
And you see the rural aesthetic starting to pop up, the white fences, the horse farms. But the economy, the reason people are there, is still entirely tethered to the city they just drove out of.
So, okay, we've got a vibe check. It feels open, but it acts urban. But how do we actually measure this? Because if I'm a sociologist or a planner, I can't just go, well, it has a vibe.
No, you need hard data. You need a formula. And for that, we have to turn to the Brookings Institution. In 2006, they published this report, Finding Exurbia.
The Bible.
The Bible. And this is a really pivotal moment because they finally gave us a checklist. They stopped just describing the vibe and started measuring census tracts.
And they came up with 3 rules. If a place meets these 3 criteria, it's officially an exurb. Let's break them down. Rule number 1, economic connection.
This is the big one. It's the most critical rule. You can't just be a small town in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
If you live in a village, say, 3 hours from a major city, and everyone who lives there works at the local mill or the school or the hospital, you are rural. You're a self-contained community.
You don't need the city to survive.
Exactly. To be an exurb, you absolutely must have that commuter tether. The source material really emphasizes this. While the housing is out in the sticks, the money, the paychecks are coming from the metropolis.
So if a blizzard closes the highway for 3 days, the exurb's economy grinds to a halt.
In an economic sense, yes. The entire value proposition of those homes is dictated by their access, however difficult, to the urban job market.
Okay, that makes sense. Rule number 2, low housing density. And the source gets super specific here. It says you have to be in the bottom third of all census tracts in the metro area when it comes to density.
Right, and what that translated to, using the year 2000 data they had, was a minimum of about 2.6 acres per resident.
Whoa, wait, 2.6 acres per resident?
Per resident, yeah.
Let's pause on that for a second. That's massive.
It is an enormous amount of space.
So if you're a family of 4, you are statistically occupying over 10 acres of land.
On average, across that census tract, yes. Now, that number would include things like common areas, undeveloped woods, roads, that sort of thing. But the feeling of the place is absolutely defined by that space.
But that's my question. 2.6 acres is kind of an awkward size, isn't it? It's way too big to mow with a regular push mower.
Oh, yeah.
But it's too small to be a real functioning farm.
That's the uncanny valley we were talking about at the start. It's what landscape architects sometimes call too big to brood, too small to farm.
I have never heard that before.
You can't run a commercial agricultural operation on it, but it creates a huge amount of maintenance. It promotes a very specific lifestyle.
The person on the riding mower for 4 hours every Saturday.
That's the one. It's land for the sake of having land, not for production.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the third rule.
Rule number 3, population growth.
This is key. The exurb has to be growing, and not just growing, but growing faster than the average for the central metropolitan area.
So it's not a sleepy, static country town.
Exactly. That's what distinguishes it from a dying rural town.
Mm.
A rural town might have low density and even a few commuters, but if its population is shrinking or just flat, it's not an exurb. The exurb is the frontier. It's actively expanding. It is eating the landscape.
It's the active front of the city's expansion.
Correct. It's where the bulldozers are working.
So why? We have the definition, we have the checklist, but I really want to understand the motivation. The commute sounds like a nightmare. The yard maintenance sounds exhausting. Why do people choose to move to the absolute edge?
Well, the Canadian research we have from 2022 touches on this. They define it a bit differently. They look for a gross population density of less than 150 people per square kilometer. But the key element is the same.
The commute.
The commute. Their definition requires that more than 50% of the workers living there are commuting into the core metro area.
More than half. That's a staggering number.
It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And it implies very conscious trade-off. People are trading their time for space.
Yeah, okay.
They're trading the convenience and culture of the city for the perceived safety, the quiet, and the status of having that country life, even if that country life is a little bit synthetic.
Suburban-style development on rural development land. That's a direct quote from one of the sources. It's a simulation of the rural experience.
It's wanting to have your cake and eat it too, but the bakery where they make the cake is a 2-hour drive away.
Now, I think a lot of Americans, and I am definitely guilty of this, we tend to think that we invented sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
We look at places like Los Angeles or Phoenix and just assume this is a uniquely American problem, caused by cheap gas and a love for pickup trucks. But the sources we have suggest that's just not true.
Not at all. It is absolutely a global phenomenon.
Mm.
Now, the specific flavor of it changes from place to place, but the underlying dynamic, the city expanding into its hinterland, that's happening everywhere.
So let's look at China, because the scale of everything in China it consistently breaks my brain.
Chuckles. It breaks everyone's brain. It's hard to comprehend.
We have this study on the city of Xiamen, and they break down the city into these density tiers. In the urban core, the density is over 51 persons per hectare.
Which is very dense. That's high-rise apartment living. That's what we'd picture as a major city.
Right. Then you move out to the suburban zone, and it drops to about 8 persons per hectare. But then you get to the exurban areas, and the definition is anything less than 8 persons per hectare.
Okay, now notice the difference there. In the U.S., the Brookings definition was based on 2.6 acres per person.
Yeah.
In China, their definition of low-density exurbia is anything under 8 people per hectare. A hectare is about 2.5 acres. So their empty exurbs are still significantly denser than most American suburbs.
Wait, say that again? Their exurb is denser than our suburb?
In many cases, yes. If you dropped a typical American exurban subdivision into the outskirts of Xiamen, they would probably classify it as, a park or uninhabited wilderness.
That's wild.
It is. But for the Chinese urban planners, that psychological drop-off from 51 people per hectare down to 8 is the same dynamic. It marks that transition from the known city to the developing edge.
There's a really interesting detail in that Chinese source material, something about rural revitalization. It specifically mentions the problem of vacant houses in rural exurbs.
Ah, yes, the Hollow Village phenomenon.
Explain that, because if the exurb is supposed to be this hotspot of growth, why on earth are there vacant houses?
It's because development in China can happen by government decree or through these massive waves of speculation. It moves incredibly fast. You might build the roads, build the high-rises, build the houses.
But the people don't come.
Or they don't stay. If the jobs aren't quite there yet, or if that economic tether to the main city isn't strong enough or convenient enough, people will leave. Or, more commonly, the younger generation will move into the true city for better opportunities, leaving that exurban village to slowly hollow out.
So the government has to step in to fix it.
Well, the source mentions this rural revitalization strategy. It's a form of state intervention to try and pump life back into these fringe areas, to prevent them from becoming modern ghost towns.
Right.
It's a reminder that exurbs aren't these inevitable success stories. They're fragile. They can fail.
Speaking of failing exurbs, or at least exurbs with a really strange trajectory. We have to talk about Russia.
Rubliovka.
Just the name of it sounds expensive. Rubliovka.
It is the Beverly Hills of Moscow, but probably with higher walls and a lot more security guards with guns.
The source calls it Moscow's poshest neighborhood, and this lines up perfectly with that original 1955 Spectorsky definition we started with. It's the wealthy fleeing the city.
It's the classic oligarch sanctuary. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, if you made a fortune in that post-Soviet boom, you moved to Rubliovka, you built a palace, and I mean, sometimes literally a palace behind a 20-foot fence. It was the ultimate status symbol.
But the source we're looking at has a twist. It describes it as shockingly empty as money pours out of Russia.
And this is what's so fascinating. The exurb, in this case, is acting as a kind of barometer for geopolitical stability.
What do you mean by that?
When the country's elite feel secure and stable, they invest in the exurb, they build their roots, their legacy estates. But when they feel unsafe, because of sanctions, war, political instability, they flee.
But they don't just move back to an apartment in Moscow.
No, they flee the country entirely. They move their money and themselves to Dubai or to London or wherever they can.
So Rubliovka becomes this museum of fleeing capital.
That's a perfect way to put it. You have these massive, opulent estates that are just sitting dark. It's the prosperous ring turning into a ghost ring. It completely challenges that idea from the Brookings report that an exurb must be a place of growth. It can also be a place of rapid flight.
Okay, let's pivot from there to India, to Mumbai, because this seems to be a totally different driver. In Russia, it's oligarchs fleeing. In China, it's massive state planning. In India, it sounds like it's all about the car.
The rapidly motorizing middle class. That is the key phrase from the study we have on Mumbai.
Historically, major Indian cities have been incredibly dense, right?
Yeah.
Very transit-oriented or walkable, just out of sheer necessity.
Absolutely. For centuries, that was the only way they could function. But as the middle class grows and gains disposable income, what is the first major purchase they want to make?
A car?
A private vehicle. It represents status, comfort, freedom, air conditioning in the heat. And as soon as you have a car, the entire geometry of your life changes. You are no longer tethered to the train station or the bus stop.
You can drive until you qualify for a mortgage.
You drive until you qualify.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. The exurb in a place like Mumbai is being birthed by the traffic jam. People are willing to move further and further out because they finally can. They're accepting that brutal commute to get the housing and the space they desire.
So it's almost like they're mimicking the American suburban trajectory from the 1950s.
They are, but it's happening at a much higher density and with, far more chaotic and underdeveloped infrastructure. It's the same pattern, just playing out in a very different context.
It's just amazing to see that same core dynamic, that trade-off between time and space, the reliance on the commute playing out in such radically different cultures.
It seems to be a human universal. We want space, but we need the city's money.
But here's the problem, and this is where we get into the friction section of our deep dive. That space that everyone wants. It isn't empty.
No, it's not.
When we look at a map and we see a big green patch, our brain just registers empty. But it's not empty. It's an ecosystem. And nature has opinions about us moving in.
Chuckles. It has very strong opinions.
The sources talk about the ecological interface. Let's start with the invisible stuff before we get to the bears. Let's talk about carbon.
Right. So this study from Xiamen specifically focuses on vegetation carbon storage.
And I feel like a lot of people have this misconception. They think, well, I'm moving to the exurbs, I'm going to have a big lawn, I'll have some trees, I'm helping the environment.
That is the common and very mistaken belief. But you can't just look at what's there now. You have to compare it to the baseline, to what was there before the subdivision was built.
Okay.
If that land was a mature forest or a wetland, it was acting as a massive carbon sponge. It was aggressively pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere and locking it away in the soil and the biomass.
But when you build an exurb on it,
When you subdivide it, even if you keep some of the big trees for aesthetics, you are fundamentally disrupting that entire system. You're sealing huge patches of soil with asphalt driveways and foundations. You're replacing the complex carbon-rich undergrowth with a simple monoculture lawn.
and a lawn just doesn't sequester carbon in the same way a forest does?
Not even close. And that's before you even add the massive carbon cost of every single resident commuting an hour each way to work in a gasoline-powered car.
So environmentally, the exurb is kind of the worst of both worlds.
In many ways, yes. You lose the density and efficiency of the city, and you degrade the ecological function of the country.
But carbon is abstract. You can't see it. You know what you can see.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Bearubs.
The New Jersey conflict.
This story from New York Magazine from 2007 is it's incredible. The headline is, Dog versus Bear, Release the Hounds.
It sounds like something from a satirical newspaper.
It totally does.
Yeah.
But it's real. So set the scene for us. Why New Jersey, of all places?
Well, New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the entire country, but the northwestern corner of the state is actually very rugged and forested. It's part of the Appalachian Highlands.
So prime bear country.
Prime black bear habitat. And as the exurbs pushed further and further out from New York City, pushing into those hills places that used to be just hunting cabins in deep woods, they ran right into the bears' living room.
And the people moving into these new homes, they're not exactly grizzled mountain folk.
Not at all. They are commuters from the city and the suburbs. They're moving there for the aesthetic of nature. They want to sit on their deck and watch a deer frolicking in the morning mist.
They want Bambi.
They want Bambi. What they get is a 400-pound bear that has figured out how to demolish their $300 specialized bear-proof trash can and is now sniffing around their back door, terrifying their golden retriever.
And this creates a massive political conflict, I assume.
Huge. On one side, you have the new residents screaming at the town council, do something about the bears, it's not safe. And on the other side, you have conservationists and, frankly, the bears themselves saying, you moved into the woods. What on earth did you expect to find here?
So what was the solution mentioned in the article, this release the hounds idea?
They were bringing in a specialized breed of dog called Karelian bear dogs.
Okay.
These are fearless dogs that are bred specifically to harass bears, to bark at them, nip at them, and basically chase them away from human areas without actually killing them. It's a form of non-lethal aversion conditioning.
So we are literally deploying tactical special ops dogs to enforce zoning laws between humans and nature.
It just perfectly highlights the fundamental absurdity and the conflict of the exurb. We want the beautiful backdrop of nature, but we want it completely sanitized for our convenience.
We want the view from the cabin, but we don't want the wildlife that comes with the cabin.
Exactly. We want the Disneyfication of the wild.
Yeah.
And it's not just bears in New Jersey. It's the catastrophic wildfire risks in the exurbs of California. It's the water usage debates in the exurbs of Arizona. We are imposing a high-intensity, resource-heavy lifestyle on landscapes that simply cannot support it.
There's another kind of friction here, though. It's not just man versus nature. It's also man versus himself, or maybe man versus loneliness.
It's social isolation component, yeah.
We talked about how these places are often called bedroom towns, but let's dig into what that actually feels like day to day. The source material notes the limited urban nature for social interaction.
Think about a traditional city neighborhood. You walk to the corner store. You bump into your neighbor on the stoop.
Yeah.
You see other parents at the playground. There are what sociologists call third places.
So like the coffee shop, the bar, the library.
Exactly. Neutral grounds that aren't home or work, where community just sort of happens organically.
But in the exurb, with those 2.6-acre lots,
You don't bump into anyone. Your entire life is mediated by your car. You get in your car, in your attached garage, you drive to work, you park in a parking garage, you drive home, you pull back into your garage, and the door closes. If you see your neighbor, it's through a windshield as they drive by.
one of our sources lists the TV show South Park in its See Also section, which I thought was hilarious at first, but actually,
It's surprisingly relevant.
South Park is this isolated mountain town. It's cut off from everything.
It perfectly represents that island mentality. When you live in a place that is so geographically removed, you can develop a very insular, unique culture. But the risk in the modern exurb is that you get the isolation without the community. In South Park, for all its weirdness, everyone knows everyone.
Right.
In a brand new exurban subdivision, you might be totally isolated and completely anonymous.
That sounds like a potential recipe for a mental health crisis.
It can be. It's particularly difficult for demographics who can't drive, teenagers, for one, and the elderly. If you can't get in the car, you're effectively trapped. You become a prisoner of the subdivision.
So if the exurb is ecologically damaging, socially isolating, and apparently prone to bear attacks, why is it still seen as the future? Or is it the future?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? And how do we even track it accurately?
Well, the sources do mention that we're moving beyond that old census data. We now have things like the Oak Ridge National Laboratory Landscan data.
And GIS, Geographic Information Systems. This is a huge leap forward. We can now use high-resolution satellite imagery to literally watch the exurbs spread across the landscape in near real time.
So we can see the lights at night expanding outward.
We can see the lights. We can track the heat signature of the land changing as forests and fields become asphalt and rooftops. We are watching it happen from space.
We're watching the agglomerations spread. That's the word the scientists use. It almost sounds like a medical condition.
It does sound a bit like a disease, doesn't it?
It does. But in the northeastern U.S., in that megalopolis from Boston to D.C., the sources mention something very specific. This isn't just sprawl spreading into empty space.
No, that's a really important distinction. Out west, you might be building an exurb on what was previously empty desert. In the Northeast or in much of Europe, you are building on top of centuries of history.
You're not just building a subdivision. You're expanding into and around towns that have been there for 300 years.
And the exurb effectively consumes that pre-existing rural structure. The old farming village with the white church steeple, it gets surrounded by cul-de-sacs. The old general store on the town green, it becomes a boutique selling expensive scented candles to the new commuter residents.
So the exurb acts as a gentrifier of the rural landscape itself.
It's a complete cultural and economic transformation. The place might still look like a historic village, but it now functions like a wealthy, distant suburb. The original character gets hollowed out.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
We've gone from Auguste Spectorsky's 1955 elites to Chinese ghost villages and tactical bear dogs.
It's been a wild ride out to the fringe.
It really has. Let's try to summarize this whole thing. If you had to boil it down, what is the story of the exurb?
I think the story is still that word interface. It started as a luxury escape for the very few. It evolved into a mass market solution for the demand for cheap, spacious housing. But no matter its form, it remains the friction point. It is the place where the definition urban is in a constant active battle with the reality of rural.
It's the active edge of the city.
It's the active edge. And I think what's most important to remember is that it's incredibly fragile.
That's the thought I want to end on. Because we saw that ghost town link in the source material. We talked about those massive Russian mansions sitting empty.
We have to ask ourselves, is any of this permanent?
Right. The entire exurban experiment depends completely on that tether we talked about. It relies on cheap gas, on the personal automobile, and on the high-paying job waiting in the city center.
So what happens if that tether breaks? If energy costs skyrocket and that 2-hour commute becomes financially impossible? What if the economy shifts, or if remote work completely changes the need to be physically near the city at all?
Does that 2.6-acre lot suddenly become a massive liability instead of an asset?
Does it revert to the wild? Does the forest start to creep back in and reclaim the lawns?
In the end, does the bear win?
Chuckles. In the long run, the bear usually wins.
That is a haunting thought to leave you with next time you're on that drive and you pass a brand new subdivision in the middle of a cornfield. Are you looking at the future, or are you looking at a future ruin?
Only time, and I suppose the bears will tell.
Thank you for taking this drive out to the edge with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.